Holden Morgan had seen his share of impressive spaceports. Everything from orbiting cities with glass domes stretched over alien oceans to freighters vast enough to carry a small planet's worth of cargo. But Aronium was something else entirely. As he descended from the intergalactic shuttle, his breath caught, and his eyes widened at the sight before him. The university's entry bay wasn't just a terminal, it was a spectacle, a world unto itself. Beneath him stretched a lush expanse of bioluminescent plants glowing in surreal hues of teal and cobalt blue. The light shimmered faintly, alive with a pulse that seemed almost organic. Above this alien garden, crystalline pathways crisscrossed the air, each one transparent enough to make Holden's stomach flip when he glanced down and saw the distant lights of the lower levels shifting like scattered constellations. He muttered a soft, "Wow," the awe slipping from his lips unbidden. This was a far cry from Earth, where stars were mere specks of light, and everything was firmly bound to the ground. Here, gravity felt different, almost fluid, as though an invisible tide shifted around him. As he took his first tentative steps onto one of the gravity-altered pathways leading into the university, the sensation left him feeling untethered and exhilarated. "First time seeing something like this?" a voice asked, smooth as polished glass and carrying a subtle undertone of curiosity. Startled, Holden turned and found himself face to face with an alien woman who was unlike anyone he'd ever seen. She was tall, her form regal and impossibly graceful. Her skin was a deep velvety midnight blue, and from her head cascaded delicate tendrils tipped in gleaming gold that caught the shifting lights around them like soft fire. Her eyes, however, were what held him. They seemed to shift between colors he couldn't name, their brilliance almost hypnotic. She didn't smile, but there was a calmness to her expression that made Holden feel both grounded and adrift. Yeah, Holden stammered, pulling his gaze away before he could be caught staring. "Earth's a bit more solid?" The woman tilted her head slightly, raising an elegant eyebrow. "You are Holden Morgan, correct? The exchange student from Terra?" "That's me," he confirmed, though a faint prickling of nerves crept up his spine under her scrutinizing gaze. She gave a short nod, a gesture that felt precise, almost rehearsed. "I am Vera, student ambassador of Aronium. I am here to guide you through your initial orientation." Her tone softened slightly, a subtle shift that Holden noticed immediately. "And," she added, "to prepare you for your unique role here." Holden blinked, thrown by her words. "Unique role? Pretty sure I'm just here to study interstellar diplomacy." It was a pretty straightforward application process. "Of course," Vera replied, though a flicker of something, doubt, passed over her face. "There have been some changes in that regard." With a slight inclination of her head, she gestured for him to follow her across the floating pathway. Adjusting his bag, Holden trailed after her, trying to ignore the gnawing unease creeping into his chest. Perhaps this was some cultural formality he hadn't been briefed on. But as they walked, he couldn't help but notice how seamlessly Vera moved, her steps light and fluid as though gravity itself bent to her will. She pointed out landmarks and shared brief facts about the university, but Holden sensed a careful watchfulness in her gaze whenever she looked his way, as if she were assessing him, measuring his reactions. Their path led into a vast atrium of polished onyx and deep amethyst lights. The space was so immense that its edges disappeared into shimmering darkness. High above, crystalline structures rotated slowly, casting beams of iridescent light that seemed to pulse in time with the energy of the room. "You've been assigned a suite in the celestial wing," Vera said, her voice breaking the silence. "It is customary for honored guests." "Honored guests?" Holden repeated, trying not to laugh at the absurdity of the formality. But her tone, laced with seriousness, silenced any humor he might have found. Instead, an odd pressure settled over him as though everyone, Vera, the staff, even other students milling in the distance, was silently expecting something from him, something he couldn't yet understand. "Honored? I'm just a guy here to learn about treaties and diplomacy," he said, finally voicing his unease. "I'm flattered really, but isn't this all a bit much?" Vera paused, turning to face him. Her expression was unreadable, but there was something intense in her gaze, something that made Holden feel as though he were standing at the edge of a precipice. "It appears the admission matrix identified you as a member of the Vathi lineage," she said carefully, her tone measured. "A tribe revered by many here, known for their profound knowledge and once believed lost to the galaxy." Holden froze, the weight of her words hitting him like a punch to the chest. "Wait me? Oh, Prince? There's gotta be some mistake." "It's not a mistake," Vera replied, though there was the faintest edge of uncertainty in her voice. "The Vathi tribe is one of our most respected lineages. Their descendants possess a rare quality known as celestial sight, a perception beyond ordinary cognitive capacities. They were once key contributors to interstellar harmony, a legacy that places certain expectations on you, whether you realize it or not. Holden let out a nervous laugh, running a hand through his hair. So, they think I have this celestial sight? I barely passed astronomy back home. I'm here because of a scholarship, not because I'm some intergalactic oracle. For the first time, Vera's lips curved into the faintest hint of a smile, a glimmer of amusement breaking through her formal demeanor. The truth may be as you say, but belief holds powerful sway here. The faculty will expect much of you regardless. And, she added, her tone growing more serious, this status you've been given may come with benefits, but it will also draw attention and scrutiny. There are those who may challenge your legitimacy. Holden glanced around, his eyes sweeping over the grandeur of the atrium, the shimmering light and precision of every detail. It was a place so perfect, so deliberate, that it felt as though it had been crafted by minds that had never known imperfection. And yet, here he was, an ordinary guy thrust into a role that felt anything but ordinary. So what do I do? He asked finally, his voice quieter. Just go along with it? Pretend I'm some lost prince? Pretending is a dangerous game here, Vera replied, her expression grave. This is not a matter of simple diplomacy or courtesy. Your words and actions will resonate far beyond these halls. If you choose to embrace this role, you will need to be prepared for the weight it carries. Holden swallowed hard, the enormity of her words settling in his chest like a stone. He took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. And if I don't? He asked, his voice tinged with uncertainty. Vera's gaze softened, her golden-tipped tendrils catching the light as she tilted her head. Then you will need to tread carefully, for both your sake and ours. Holden looked back toward the shimmering pathways, the crystalline structures, the bioluminescent glow of the plants below. It all felt surreal, like something out of a story he'd read as a kid. Only now, he was the protagonist, standing at the crossroads of a story he wasn't sure he was ready to tell. Those outlandish hollow novels his sister loved flickered through Holden Morgan's mind as he sat alone in his suite, the grandeur of Aronium's floating city pressing down on him like a weight he couldn't shake off. The more he thought about it, the more he realized he didn't have a choice. Not if he wanted to stay. Not if he wanted to make sense of what was happening. All the alien landscapes, strange cultures, and grand expectations seemed surreal, yet here he was, a participant in a journey he hadn't chosen. A path forged by an admission matrix that saw him not as Holden Morgan, the Earthling scholar, but as something far more extraordinary. A member of a lineage once thought lost to the galaxy. A supposed heir to a legacy of celestial sight. He sat on the plush cushions of the lavish suite, his mind racing with questions and doubts. The soft amber glow that bathed the room in warmth was comforting, but it only served to highlight the vastness of the questions looming before him. What was he supposed to do? How was he supposed to live up to something he couldn't comprehend? Vera's words echoed in his ears, "You are not alone here." But that didn't ease the tension that gripped him. The overwhelming grandeur of Aronium wasn't just a backdrop to his newfound reality, it was part of it. Every crystalline structure, shimmering light, and gravity-altered pathway was a constant reminder of the expectations placed on him. The next morning Holden barely slept. Every time he closed his eyes, his mind swirled with visions of the alien world. A surreal landscape of bioluminescent flora, suspended architecture, and Vera's piercing gaze. It was unsettling, disorienting, and exhilarating all at once. After a splash of cool water on his face, Holden left his suite, determined to face the day head-on. His first scheduled class awaited him, Celestial Sight Theory. The name alone felt as though he was stepping into a realm 1,000 years beyond his comprehension. Every detail, from the intricate symbols on the instructor's robes to the otherworldly forms of his fellow students, seemed tailored to intimidate. Entering the classroom, he felt a ripple of silence settle over the other students. Their eyes subtly shifted in his direction, some awestruck, others cautiously skeptical. They were a diverse mix of species, some humanoid, others far more alien. Bioluminescent beings shimmered softly, while cloaked figures moved with an almost liquid grace, their forms blending into the air around them. Unsure of how to respond, Holden chose the safest option, ignoring the attention. He took a seat at the back of the classroom, staring resolutely at his desk. It wasn't long before Vera entered, her presence commanding but graceful. She was draped in a deep indigo robe adorned with metallic symbols he couldn't decipher. Her gold-tipped tendrils were braided with thin silver cords, moving with a rhythmic fluidity. When her gaze briefly flicked toward him, acknowledging his presence with a small, unreadable smile. Holden felt the weight of all eyes returning to him once more. The instructor, Professor Zion, floated into the room shortly after, their ethereal form shifting between light and shadow, solid and translucent. Their voice resonated like two chords vibrating in perfect harmony, filling the space with a sense of gravitas. "Welcome to Celestial Sight Theory," Professor Zion said, their voice echoing through the room. "In this course, we will explore the concept of celestial sight, an awareness that transcends perception, an understanding that reaches beyond the physical limitations of our existence." Holden's stomach twisted. The other students listened with rapt attention, as though participating in some sacred ritual. He, on the other hand, felt like an imposter, someone who had stumbled into a ceremony he wasn't invited to. The overwhelming expectation was suffocating. As Professor Zion continued, Holden glanced around the room, catching snippets of hushed whispers in languages he couldn't understand. It didn't matter if he knew the exact words, the meaning was clear. Some students were fascinated by his presence, while others regarded him with thinly veiled skepticism. The pressure was unbearable, and it only grew heavier with every passing second. Finally, when the professor invited the class to ask questions, a slender, iridescent-skinned student with glistening green eyes raised her hand. Her voice was soft but unyielding. "Professor," she began, her gaze fixed squarely on Holden. "If Holden Morgan is indeed of AoE descent, as the admissions matrix claims, then he must possess the ability to experience celestial sight. Perhaps he could demonstrate?" A wave of murmurs spread through the class, and the anticipation thickened in the air. Holden's throat tightened, his mind racing for a way to avoid the spotlight. He could barely stay upright in this gravity-shifting environment, let alone perform some mystical display. Professor Zion turned toward him, their gaze curious yet relentless. "Mr. Morgan," they said softly, "would you be willing to share your insight? Perhaps describe your connection to celestial sight?" Holden's mind scrambled for anything that might sound plausible, but before he could open his mouth, Vera's smooth, measured voice interrupted. "Professor," she said, her tone poised but firm. "Holden is still new to our ways, unfamiliar with the customs of the Vathi lineage. It would be unfair to expect a demonstration from someone still acclimating to Aronium and our ways." The professor tilted their heads slightly, considering her words, though their gaze lingered on Holden for a moment longer. "A fair point, Miss Vera," they said finally. "Mr. Morgan's discovery of his abilities may indeed take time." Holden shot a grateful glance at Vera, who returned it with the smallest nod. For the first time since stepping foot on Aronium, a sliver of relief washed over him. She had stepped in, unseen, yet precisely when it mattered most. But the question still hung in the air, unanswered and relentless. The weight of his supposed heritage sat heavily on his shoulders, a burden far heavier than he had anticipated. Holden Morgan wasn't sure what he would have done without Vera's intervention, but her support only deepened the mystery surrounding her. Was she merely performing her duty as an ambassador, guiding him through the intricacies of Aronium, or was there something more personal in her willingness to shield him? Their interaction left him feeling both grateful and unsettled. As the lecture ended and the other students filtered out, Holden gathered his belongings ready to leave. Just as he was about to step out into the hallway, Vera appeared beside him, her gaze calm and steady, like a quiet anchor in the midst of the storm. "Thank you for getting me out of that," Holden said, his voice hesitant, not quite able to meet her eyes. "I didn't expect to be put on the spot like that." "It's a natural consequence of your position," she replied, her voice gentle but with a hint of amusement at his discomfort. "Many here have never seen a VY Heir, or at least someone who might be one. They expect revelations." He ran a hand through his hair, feeling the weight of it all settle back on him. "So, this is just normal for you?" Her expression softened, though only slightly. "If only slightly," she admitted. "I know what it is to carry the weight of expectations that don't belong to you." Holden met her gaze, sensing the unspoken burden behind her words. "So why help me if you don't mind me asking?" She considered him carefully, her eyes thoughtful. "Perhaps because I see in you something more genuine than those around us do. They see a VY prince. I see someone who would rather not be caught up in this at all." He let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding, relieved to be seen for who he truly was, if only for a moment. "You're right about that." They began walking together through the arching halls of Aronium, their footsteps echoing in the stillness. An odd energy simmered in the air, a feeling Holden couldn't quite place. It was like standing on the edge of something immense, something he hadn't yet grasped. "Tell me about the VY," Holden said after a pause, glancing at her. What exactly were they known for, and what is this celestial site supposed to be? Vera's gaze became distant, her expression tinged with something almost wistful. The Vathi were a tribe revered for their connection to the very fabric of our universe. They believed that seeing, truly seeing, was not about vision but about understanding. A vision that could penetrate time and space. A sight that could unite perspectives across galaxies. Holden frowned, struggling to wrap his mind around the concept. So, it's like a cosmic sixth sense? Not quite, she said, her voice thoughtful. The sight was something deeper. It suggested that the Vathi could perceive a harmony within the universe that most beings can't even imagine. A unity between the physical and the intangible. He was quiet for a moment, absorbing her words. And you believe this stuff? That I'm part of them? Her gaze flicked back to him, and for the first time, he saw a glimmer of something vulnerable beneath her calm exterior. Belief, Holden, is a fragile thing. In a place like Aronium, belief can be a tool, a weapon, a hope, and sometimes just a story we tell ourselves to make sense of the unknown. Holden opened his mouth to respond, but the sound of distant footsteps interrupted them. Two figures were approaching, both draped in deep red robes that glimmered faintly in the dim light. They stopped a few paces away, their gazes cool and assessing. One of them, a tall, severe-looking figure with silvery skin and a series of intricate symbols etched along his jawline, spoke first. Holden Morgan, he said, his voice resonant and unyielding, we require a moment of your time. Holden felt Vera's tension beside him, her posture subtly shifting almost protectively. He gave her a sidelong glance, then turned back to the strangers, forcing himself to keep his voice steady. Sure. What's this about? The second figure, a shorter alien with eyes like dark mirrors, tilted her head slightly, her expression unreadable. There are those among the council who question your lineage. They believe you to be a fabrication, a pretender. Holden's heart skipped a beat. A pretender? He echoed. I didn't. You wear the guise of a VY Heir, the taller figure interrupted, his gaze sharp, but there are those who would have you prove your identity. They will accept nothing less than a demonstration of celestial sight itself. Holden's stomach twisted. A demonstration? He could barely understand what celestial sight was, let alone demonstrate it. I don't know what you're talking about, he stammered. I never claimed to have any kind of powers. Nevertheless, the shorter one said softly, you will be expected to show your worth. Vera stepped forward, her gaze unyielding. Holden's knowledge of his lineage is still developing. To demand such proof from him now is both premature and inappropriate. The taller figure studied her with a faint, disdainful smirk. Vera, your dedication to his cause is noted. But do remember that such loyalty may cost you your own standing. The threat was clear, and Holden felt a surge of anger on her behalf. She had done nothing but help him, shield him from scrutiny, and now she was being drawn into a political game he barely understood. He opened his mouth to protest, but Vera laid a hand on his arm, her touch gentle but firm enough to calm him. Holden, she said, her voice steady, and I will prepare as is his right. But you will not force him to display powers he does not yet understand. The two figures exchanged a look before inclining their heads, a gesture that felt more like a warning than respect. Very well, the taller said finally. But we will be watching. As they turned and walked away, Holden felt a strange, unfamiliar warmth in his chest, a mixture of gratitude, anger, and something he couldn't quite name. He looked at Vera, her calm demeanor restored, though the faint tension in her posture lingered. Why do you keep defending me? He asked quietly. You barely know me. Her gaze softened, and for a brief moment, he saw something raw and unguarded in her eyes. Because, Holden, she said gently, perhaps I see in you what others refuse to see. Someone caught. Between expectation and reality, Holden Morgan felt the weight of being someone who never asked for this life yet was expected to be so much more. The constant pressure, the whispers of doubt, and the relentless gaze of those who doubted his worth pressed down on him like a heavy burden. He swallowed hard, feeling the depth of Vera's words settle over him like a cloak woven from uncertainty. They walked in silence, each lost in their own thoughts. As they moved through the corridors of Aronium, Holden felt an unfamiliar resolve hardening within him. If he was going to survive here, if he was going to live up to the impossible expectations placed upon him, he would have to uncover what it truly meant to be VY. But more than that, he wouldn't be alone in this journey. Vera's presence beside him was a steadying force, a silent promise that she would guide him through the unfamiliar and the terrifying. Holding his breath, Holden felt like he was walking a tightrope, every step balancing precariously between expectation and reality. Together, they made their way to the archives of Aronium, with Vera guiding him silently through gravity-shifting corridors. His footsteps echoed softly against the transparent, floating pathways, and his heart pounded with the realization of what he was about to do. The words of the two council members accusing him of being a pretender echoed in his mind, fueling an anger that simmered just beneath the surface. This wasn't what he'd signed up for. Yet he knew one thing for certain: he was done letting others dictate his worth. The vast archive chamber loomed ahead, its entrance flanked by towering statues of former scholars. Each one was carved from a translucent material that shimmered with an inner light. Holden hadn't dared step foot inside before. The story spoke of a sacred place, reserved only for the most esteemed students, and yet here he was, handpicked by Vera for a lesson far beyond anything he could have imagined. When the door closed behind them with a soft hiss, Vera turned to him, her gaze level and intense. "This room contains texts that even I, as an ambassador, was not granted access to until recently," she said quietly. "The Veloy texts are controversial. Some view them as relics, others as near sacred, and there are those who believe they hold the key to powers beyond our comprehension." Holden's eyes scanned the vast chamber. The sight was staggering. Rows upon rows of floating shelves spiraled upward, each shelf brimming with artifacts and texts. Tablets etched with glowing symbols, data crystals arranged in concentric rings, and holograms of diagrams and maps floated effortlessly in midair. The sheer volume of knowledge surrounding him was overwhelming. "So what exactly am I supposed to be looking for here?" he asked quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. The air felt heavier, suffused with an intensity that pressed down on him, as though he had entered a space reserved for a truth far beyond his grasp. Vera approached one of the lower shelves, her fingers hovering over a series of ancient tablets. "The texts here speak of something known as stellar harmonics," she said softly. "According to Vathi philosophy, it is the essence of cosmic balance, a state of unity that binds all energy in the universe." Holden frowned, struggling to make sense of her words. "And that's what they think I can do, harmonize the entire universe?" She smiled faintly, a glint of amusement in her otherwise serious expression. "Hardly. But they believe that as a VY, you may possess a latent connection to this energy, a perception they called celestial sight. The potential to sense these harmonics, to understand them on a level beyond what most can imagine." Holden felt a pang of frustration. The weight of expectation pressed down on him once more. "You keep saying they believe, they think, but what about you?" His tone sharpened, though the room felt too heavy for him to speak any louder. "Do you think I have it?" Vera studied him carefully, her eyes softening. "Whether or not you possess celestial sight, Holden, is something you must discover for yourself. But I do believe you have courage, the kind the Veloy revered, a bravery to question, to push against the boundaries others accept without thought." She stepped closer, her gaze unwavering. "If nothing else, that makes you worthy." Holden's shoulders eased slightly. Her words settled the storm of doubt churning within him, though the lingering weight of expectation was still present. He nodded, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "All right. So where do I start?" Vera handed him a tablet, its surface inscribed with intricate patterns that glowed faintly in his hands. The symbols shifted and twisted, almost alive, pulsing faintly with a rhythm that matched his heartbeat. Holden glanced up at Vera, feeling a surge of nervous energy. "Focus on the symbols," she instructed gently. "Let your mind reach beyond what you see." The Veloy believed that sight was more than vision. It was understanding, connection. He nodded, taking a deep breath and letting his gaze settle on the swirling patterns. As he stared, the shapes seemed to grow, stretching outward. Each symbol revealed smaller patterns within itself, spiraling deeper and deeper, like looking into an endless reflection. He could feel something tugging at the edges of his consciousness, a sensation both foreign and familiar. For a moment, he felt as if he were floating in a vast, boundless space, darkness punctuated by flickers of light, pulses vibrating in time with his breath. Stars surrounded him, their energy vibrating with an intensity that made his pulse quicken. His mind brushed against something, a hum, a whisper on the edge of awareness. Then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the sensation faded, slipping through his fingers like water. Holden blinked, coming back to himself, feeling the weight of the tablet in his hands once more. I don't know what I just saw," he murmured, shaken but exhilarated. Vera's gaze was warm, encouraging. "That is a beginning," she said softly. "The Vathi called it the first glimpse, the recognition that you are part of something beyond yourself. And the universe in turn is part of you. Holden tried to shake off the lingering sense of wonder, but he couldn't ignore the way his skin tingled as though he were still touching that boundless energy. I don't know if I believe in all of this cosmic harmony stuff, he said quietly, but it felt real. Vera nodded, a hint of pride in her expression. Belief, as I said, is fragile. You are not required to understand it fully, only to acknowledge its presence. Before he could respond, a sudden shudder rippled through the room. A faint vibration shook the tablets and artifacts, making them tremble. The soft ambient light flickered, dimming before flaring back to life. Vera's expression tightened, her posture shifting subtly as she scanned their surroundings. "Stay close to me," she whispered, her voice taut with urgency. "Is something wrong?" Holden felt the charged tension in the air, thick and foreign, an energy unlike anything he'd felt before. He could sense it, feel it tightening around them. "Yes," Vera replied softly. "Something is coming." Holden's gaze flicked toward the entrance, his eyes narrowing. Oron's defenses were rarely breached. If there was an interruption, it likely meant trouble before she could finish. The doors to the archive burst open, and a group of figures clad in sleek black armor stormed into the chamber. Their movements were swift and precise, their eyes hidden behind reflective visors that shimmered ominously. Holden's stomach dropped as he recognized the insignia emblazoned on their shoulders, a symbol of 3 interlocking circles, the Drakh Collective. His pulse raced, panic clawing at his chest. "The Drakh," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "What are they doing here?" "The Drakh have long sought the knowledge the Veloi left behind," Vera murmured, her tone grim. "They believe it's the key to controlling stellar harmonics, and by extension the entire galaxy." One of the intruders stepped forward, scanning the room with a mechanical device. "Locate the Veloi Heir," he commanded, his voice flat and devoid of emotion. "Secure him and any artifact of note." Holden's breath caught in his throat. This wasn't an ordinary threat. These were mercenaries from a faction known for their ruthlessness, their unyielding hunger to dominate through control of ancient knowledge. He glanced at Vera, whose expression remained resolute as she met his gaze. Her hand moved subtly, reaching for a thin metallic staff tucked into her robe. "They cannot take you," she whispered urgently. "If they capture you, they'll twist your connection to celestial sight into a weapon." Holden's mind raced, the weight of her words sinking in. He hadn't even begun to understand his so-called powers, let alone wield them. And now, faced with enemies who viewed him as nothing more than a tool for their ambitions, he felt an overwhelming sense of vulnerability. As the mercenaries moved closer, Vera raised her staff. A shimmering field of energy expanded around them, creating a protective dome of light that pulsed gently. The Drakh forces halted momentarily, taken aback by the sudden barrier. Their reflective visors reflected the dome's glow. "Stay close to me," Vera urged, her voice steady despite the urgency. "I need you to trust me. We're going to activate a decoy to mislead them." "A decoy?" Holden asked, feeling his pulse race. "How?" Vera's gaze locked onto his, intense and focused. "There's an artifact here, a Veloi projection crystal. If I can channel your energy into it, it will create an illusion of you, a version they'll believe to be real long enough for us to escape." Holden swallowed hard, glancing at the advancing group. "And what happens if they see through it?" "Then we'll need to run very, very fast," Vera replied, her voice carrying a rare hint of dark humor. Taking a deep breath, Holden forced himself to nod. "Let's do it." Vera led him to a small ornate pedestal. On its surface rested a crystalline sphere, its surface faintly glowing with an otherworldly light. She placed his hand over it, guiding him to mirror her movements as she began to channel her energy. "Close your eyes," she instructed softly. "Let your mind expand. Reach out to the crystal. Imagine yourself filling the space around you." Holden drew in a shaky breath, recalling the sensation he had felt earlier, the awareness that stretched beyond sight, the hum of distant energy he couldn't quite name. He let himself sink into that feeling, imagining his essence pouring outward, mingling with the air, blending with the light. A sudden warmth pulsed beneath his hand. When he opened his eyes, a shimmering image of himself stood beside Vera, as solid and real as though he were standing there in person. The mercenaries paused, their weapons trained on the projection. One of them spoke into his communicator. "Target located. Moving in." Vera tightened her grip on Holden's hand, her gaze fierce with determination. "Now we run." They slipped through a side corridor, Holden glancing back just in time to see the Drakh forces converging on the illusion. His pulse raced as they navigated the winding passages of Aronium, each turn taking them deeper into the heart of the university. Finally, they emerged onto a secluded terrace overlooking the bioluminescent expanse of the campus. Holden doubled over, catching his breath as he took in the surreal landscape. The colors blended into each other in mesmerizing displays, glowing greens, blues and purples reflecting across the crystalline structures and shifting pathways. Vera placed a hand on his shoulder, her expression a mix of relief and resolve. "They will search for you, Holden. You are no longer just an exchange student here to the Drakh. You are a key, one they will not abandon." Holden straightened, meeting her gaze with renewed determination. "I don't know if I can live up to what they think I am," he said, his voice steady. "But I'm done hiding." Vera's eyes softened, a small, approving smile crossing her lips. "Then we shall prepare, Holden. Together." As they stood there, the night closing in around them, Holden felt the vastness of Aronium settle over him. A sense of responsibility, of purpose awakening within him for the first time. Whatever the Drakh wanted, he would be ready. With Vera by his side, he would uncover the truth behind his connection to celestial sight, and he would face the dangers that awaited him, one step at a time. Holden could feel the weight of his decision pressing down on him like the low-gravity fields of Aronium had just intensified. His footsteps echoed down the hallowed halls of the university, his mind replaying the confrontation with the Drakh collective. He had never signed up for intergalactic espionage, yet here he was, running from mercenaries while trying to make sense of a mystical power everyone insisted he possessed. Vera moved beside him with quiet intensity. She glanced at him occasionally, her golden-tipped tendrils catching the dim light as they walked. "Tonight," she said in a low voice, "we will go to the chamber of the celestial sight. It is a place of testing, a place where the VY once trained to connect with stellar harmonics." Holden's pulse quickened. "Another test?" he asked, frustration slipping into his voice despite his efforts to keep it in check. Vera stopped, turning to face him. Her gaze was steady, unwavering. "The sight is not about understanding alone. It's about embracing the connection, the recognition of something beyond the physical realm, something that extends beyond comprehension." Holden let out a sigh, frustration bubbling up again. "Every time I try, I just see flickers. Shapes I don't understand." Vera's expression softened further. "The sight is not instantaneous, Holden. It is a journey. And each glimpse, no matter how fleeting, is a step toward understanding." She placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder, her warmth grounding him amidst his doubts. "Trust the process," she whispered. With that, they continued their journey through the corridors, the weight of expectation still heavy, but their resolve unwavering. Together they would push forward, one trial at a time. Holden stood in the chamber of celestial sight, his hands still resting on the crystalline orb. His pulse raced, the weight of his experience pressing down on him. The vision had been vivid, overwhelming, a journey beyond the physical world into the essence of the universe itself. Stars shimmered and swirled around him, their slow, harmonious patterns weaving together a melody of existence that he could feel in every fiber of his being. The figure of the man in ethereal robes had spoken to him, grounding him with words of unity and connection. Yet, despite the clarity of the vision, doubts still clung to him like shadows in the dimly lit chamber. Vera's presence was a comforting anchor in the storm of emotions swirling within him. Her eyes shimmered with a soft glow, her expression a mixture of relief and reverence. "You saw them, didn't you?" she asked gently. "The ancestors." Holden nodded, his voice a whisper. I think I understand now. The sight. It's about being part of the universe, about feeling the connection between everything." Vera's smile widened slightly, her golden-tipped tendrils catching the dim light. "Yes. And now that understanding will guide you." Their moment of calm, however, was short-lived. The low hum of approaching footsteps echoed through the chamber, sharp and steady. Vera's expression hardened, her gaze narrowing as Professor Zion stepped into the room. The professor's translucent form flickered slightly, revealing a presence both ancient and enigmatic. Their expression was unreadable, a mask of calm professionalism that unsettled Holden more than he cared to admit. "Holden, Vera," Zion said, inclining their head in a formal gesture. "It seems you have made significant progress." Holden tensed, his mind racing with uncertainty. The energy from the celestial sight still resonated within him, a pulse that seemed to hum beneath his skin. His instincts screamed caution as he absorbed the professor's words, each syllable heavy with implication. "We have received concerning news," Zion continued, their voice steady but tinged with gravity. "The Drakh collective has moved closer to our sector. They are aware of your progress, Holden, and they are mobilizing their forces to intercept you. Holden's stomach sank, a surge of anger mingling with the adrenaline coursing through him. His fists clenched at his sides, the weight of responsibility pressing down on him. Then why aren't we doing anything to stop them? He demanded, his voice rising despite his efforts to keep it steady. Zion's expression remained calm, unyielding. We are not a people of war, they said simply, their voice measured. But we are prepared to defend our legacy. However, we cannot protect you indefinitely. Vera stepped forward, her hand gently resting on Holden's arm. Her gaze met his, steady and reassuring. Holden, she said softly, this is the final step. You will not be alone. Zion's gaze shifted from Holden to Vera. We will need Holden to undergo one final trial, a demonstration if you will, to prove his connection to celestial sight. Only then will he be fully recognized as Veloy. With that recognition, our people will protect him without hesitation. Holden's mind whirled with the weight of the statement. Another trial. After everything he had just experienced, the visions, the truths revealed, and the bond he had felt with something greater, he wasn't sure he had the strength to endure another test. Yet, the thought of abandoning everything, of letting the Drakh claim control over his connection to celestial sight, was far worse. He wanted to argue, to scream that he wasn't ready, but Vera's steady presence gave him pause. You'll be fine, she said quietly, her voice carrying a reassuring calm. You've come this far. This is your path. The weight of her words settled over him, a steady reminder that his journey wasn't over. Zion gave a slight nod, their form beginning to fade like mist dissipating in the air. You have 1 hour to prepare. The Drakh forces will not wait. The hour passed in a blur. Holden's thoughts raced, the images of the vision replaying in his mind. The ancestors had shown him unity, the vastness of the cosmos weaving through everything. They had shared a truth that was as much a burden as it was a gift. The connection was not something to wield or control but to embrace. Still doubts lingered. Could he truly protect that connection, or would his humanity falter under the weight of such responsibility? As the minutes slipped away, Vera helped him prepare. They gathered the essentials, a bundle of crystalline tools, ancient texts that shimmered with glyphs of forgotten wisdom, and the metallic staff Vera carried at her side. Each piece was imbued with the remnants of Veloy power, and Holden felt their weight in his hands, the energy coursing through them as though the universe itself recognized his effort. When the final moments arrived, Vera stood beside him in the center of the chamber. The crystalline orb hovered between them, pulsing with a steady rhythm. The air felt charged with anticipation, the room crackling with energy as if the very fabric of existence was watching. You are ready, Vera whispered, her voice steady. Remember what you felt in the vision. Let it guide you. Holden closed his eyes, drawing in a deep breath. The orb shimmered before him, its light almost blinding as he focused on the memory of the stars, the warmth of unity, and the sense of being part of something greater. He let go of fear, of doubt, and embraced the connection, the truth that had been waiting for him all along. The energy surged and his vision shifted once more. The universe unfolded before him, vast and limitless. The stars danced in their slow, harmonious patterns, and the presence of the ancestors lingered beside him. He felt their strength, their guidance, and their reassurance that he wasn't alone. When he opened his eyes again, Vera stood before him, a smile of triumph on her face. You did it, she said softly. You've connected. Holden's breath caught in his chest, his heart swelling with a newfound sense of purpose. He had passed the trial, not as a tool to be used but as a part of something timeless, something woven into the fabric of existence itself. We must go, Vera said, her voice urgent. The Drakh are near. Together they stepped forward into the unknown, their connection to celestial sight a beacon that would guide them through the trials ahead. Holden stood in the Grand Council chamber, his breath catching in his chest as the energy from the celestial sight gradually faded. The weight of the moment pressed down on him, yet there was a profound sense of accomplishment. The council members, once stoic and distant, now regarded him with expressions of respect, awe, and even reverence. He had faced the trials, embraced the sight, and protected Eronium from the Drakh collective. He was VY, and for the first time he truly believed it. Vera approached him, her expression softened with relief and quiet pride. You did it, Holden, she said gently, her voice steady but warm. The council has witnessed the truth of who you are. The legacy of the VY lives on. Holden met her gaze, the flicker of uncertainty still evident in his eyes. But what does that mean, Vera? This sight, this legacy, it's not something I ever wanted or even believed in until now. And I still don't fully understand it? Vera placed a comforting hand on his arm, her golden-tipped tendrils shifting gently as she searched his face. The sight is not something you wield, Holden. It is a connection you carry. Whether you understand it fully or not, it has chosen you. Her voice softened further, her words soothing yet firm. But that doesn't mean you have to stay here. The universe is vast, and your journey is yours to define. A wave of relief washed over Holden at her words. Though Aronium had opened his mind to the possibilities of his Veloy heritage, part of him still longed for the simplicity of Earth. The familiar rhythms, the logic that guided his life before, seemed a stark contrast to the mystical path he was now walking. Yet another part of him, a quieter, deeper part, felt the stirrings of something new, a pull toward the stars that he couldn't ignore. The council member with the silver-etched face stepped forward, breaking the silence. Their voice was steady, commanding attention even in the stillness of the chamber. Holden Morgan, they began, inclining their heads slightly. You are now recognized as Ias Vathi, a bearer of the sight and a protector of our heritage. The council's collective gaze turned to him, their expressions filled with a mixture of pride and expectation. The council will grant you whatever resources you need to continue your journey, the silver-faced council member continued, but you must decide. Will you stay among us and learn the ways of the Veloy, or return to your world carrying our legacy in spirit? Holden's gaze flicked to Vera, who gave a subtle nod, almost imperceptible, as if to say that his choice was entirely his own. He took a deep breath, gathering his thoughts. I never imagined, Holden began, his voice quiet yet steady, that my life would lead me here. To this moment. I never sought power or recognition. Earth, it's home. Familiar. And yet, something within me, something I can't ignore, has connected with something greater. With the stars, with the sight, with the legacy of the VY. He paused, his mind swirling with emotions. Staying here, learning what it means to truly be part of this, feels like the path I'm meant to walk. But what if I don't fully understand it yet? What if I make mistakes? I'm not ready to carry this burden on my own. Vera's smile softened, her gaze unwavering. None of us ever are ready at first. The sight is not a burden, it's a part of you. And even when the weight feels heavy, you are never alone. The ancestors walk with you. The council is here to guide you. Holden absorbed her words, a quiet determination settling within him. He could feel the truth of her statements. There was no perfect moment, no complete readiness. Embracing the sight meant walking forward, step by step, even when the path wasn't clear. It was a journey of learning, of growth, and ultimately of unity with something far greater than himself. The council member with the silver face spoke again. Your choice, Holden Morgan, is one only you can make. You are the heir to a legacy that spans the cosmos, but how you wield it, how you shape your journey, is yours alone. Holden nodded slowly, the weight of his decision pressing on him. He couldn't return to Earth without understanding the full extent of his connection to celestial sight. The knowledge, the power, and the responsibility had become inseparable from his very being. And though the call of familiarity still lingered, the allure of the stars and the promise of something deeper pushed him forward. I will stay, Holden said softly but with purpose. I'll learn what it means to be Veloy, to carry the sight. And together, he glanced at Vera, we'll protect Aronium and uncover the truths that lie beyond. A collective murmur of agreement spread through the council chamber. The silver-faced council member nodded, their expression solemn but approving. Then we welcome you, Ias Vathi Holden Morgan. Your journey begins anew. The chamber grew quiet once again, the energy within it shifting as if the very fabric of reality acknowledged his choice. Holden stood tall, the legacy of the VY coursing through him, ready to embrace whatever challenges lay ahead. Holden found himself standing in the heart of the Grand Council chamber once more, the weight of his decision pressing heavily upon him. The silver-faced council members stood before him, their gaze calm yet filled with a sense of purpose. The room was alive with a quiet energy, the ancient symbols glowing softly against the walls, casting a tranquil yet otherworldly light. Vera, at his side, offered him a steady presence, her usual calm demeanor giving him a sense of grounding as the moment unfolded. If you had told me a month ago, Holden began slowly, his voice echoing softly through the chamber, that I would be standing in the heart of an alien university, discussing cosmic harmonics and my place in the vastness of the universe, I would have laughed. He allowed a small smile to form, the corners of his lips curving upward despite the weight of the moment. But now, I feel a pull toward something greater. I know I'm part of something bigger than myself. His gaze shifted, taking in the faces of the council members before finally resting on Vera. There was a quiet strength in her expression, a steadiness that gave him a sense of comfort and resolve. She had been by his side since the beginning of this journey, a guide through uncharted territory, and her presence made him feel less alone. "But I can't just stay here," Holden continued. "Locked away in an ivory tower, surrounded by the echoes of ancient knowledge. If I have a connection to this universe, I want to explore it. I want to experience it." He paused, letting his words sink in before meeting Vera's eyes again. "And if that means protecting the site, I want to understand how it fits into the rest of the galaxy. How it harmonizes with everything beyond." A murmur rippled through the council as some members nodded in agreement while others regarded him with quiet approval. The silver-faced council member inclined their head, their voice steady and composed. "Then we will equip you as a true Veloe. A voyager among the stars, a guardian of harmony." With those words, Holden felt a surge of both excitement and apprehension. A vessel. A ship of his own to traverse the galaxy. The thought thrilled him, filling him with wonder, yet also caused a flutter of doubt. He had dreamed of adventure, of journeys to the unknown, but never had he imagined it would carry him this far beyond everything he had known. Vera stepped forward, her gaze intent as she met his eyes. "If you are to carry this legacy, Holden, you will need a companion, a guide. And if you would allow it, I would accompany you." Her voice softened slightly, her usual composed tone faltering for just a moment as something more vulnerable shone through. A deep understanding that the journey they were about to embark on was not one to be faced alone. "You have shown me that the site is not something to hold behind walls, but something to experience, to share." Holden's heart skipped a beat. The thought of traveling the stars with Vera at his side was both thrilling and grounding. She had been his anchor through the trials, a constant presence in an ever-changing reality. The idea of facing the vast, unpredictable universe without her seemed unimaginable. "I'd like that," Holden replied softly, his voice steadier than he felt. "But are you sure? You'd be leaving Aronium, everything you've known?" Vera gave him a small, knowing smile, her golden-tipped tendrils shifting gently as she searched his face. "The universe has a way of calling us to unexpected paths. And I believe my place is with you, wherever that path may lead." With that, the decision was made. The council members murmured among themselves before stepping forward one by one to offer their blessings. Each one offered a brief touch on his forehead, a traditional VY gesture that left him with a faint warmth, a sense of grounding that steadied him as the reality of his choice settled over him. The next day, Holden and Vera stood in the docking bay of Aronium, where a sleek silver ship awaited them. Its surface shimmered softly with the same ethereal star-like glow he had seen in the chamber, its design unlike anything he had ever encountered on Earth. The council had provided a small crew to assist them in preparing for launch, ensuring that everything was ready for their journey into the stars. Holden walked around the vessel, running his hand along the smooth, cool metal. This was it, the start of a journey that would take him far beyond the limits of everything he had imagined. Vera approached him carrying a small metallic cube. She pressed it into his hand, and the surface shimmered before transforming into a holographic map filled with distant star systems and faint lines marking potential routes. "This is our map," she said, her voice carrying a note of excitement she rarely revealed. "It's synchronized to the network of Veloe outposts throughout the galaxy. We'll be able to navigate and stay connected with other Velothi protectors should we need them." Holden gazed at the map, the countless star systems stretching out before him like an open road. "It's beautiful," he murmured, struck by the sheer vastness of it all. Vera's expression softened, a warmth in her gaze that was usually hidden behind her diplomatic poise. "And it's only the beginning. Every journey has a rhythm, a harmony that guides it. We'll find ours along the way." Holden nodded, feeling a surge of gratitude for her presence. The vastness of the galaxy was intimidating, but with Vera beside him, he felt a sense of purpose that tempered his fears. As they boarded the ship, the familiar weight of gravity shifted, adapting to his form. He settled into the pilot's seat, and Vera took her place beside him, her fingers gliding over the controls with practiced ease. "Are you ready?" she asked, her gaze steady, filled with a quiet strength. Holden absorbed her words, a quiet determination settling within him. He could feel the truth of her statements. There was no perfect moment, no complete readiness. Embracing the sight meant walking forward, step by step, even when the path wasn't clear. It was a journey of learning, of growth, and ultimately of unity with something far greater than himself. The council member with the silver face spoke again. "Your choice, Holden Morgan, is one only you can make. You are the heir to a legacy that spans the cosmos, but how you wield it, how you shape your journey, is yours alone. Holden nodded slowly, the weight of his decision pressing on him. He couldn't return to Earth without understanding the full extent of his connection to celestial sight. The knowledge, the power, and the responsibility had become inseparable from his very being. And though the call of familiarity still lingered, the allure of the stars and the promise of something deeper pushed him forward. I will stay, Holden said softly but with purpose. I'll learn what it means to be Veloy, to carry the sight. And together, he glanced at Vera, we'll protect Aronium and uncover the truths that lie beyond. A collective murmur of agreement spread through the council chamber. The silver-faced council member nodded, their expression solemn but approving. Then we welcome you, Is Vathi Holden Morgan. Your journey begins anew. The chamber grew quiet once again, the energy within it shifting as if the very fabric of reality acknowledged his choice. Holden stood tall, the legacy of the VY coursing through him, ready to embrace whatever challenges lay ahead. Holden found himself standing in the heart of the Grand Council chamber once more, the weight of his decision pressing heavily upon him. The silver-faced council members stood before him, their gaze calm yet filled with a sense of purpose. The room was alive with a quiet energy, the ancient symbols glowing softly against the walls, casting a tranquil yet otherworldly light. Vera, at his side, offered him a steady presence, her usual calm demeanor giving him a sense of grounding as the moment unfolded. If you had told me a month ago, Holden began slowly, his voice echoing softly through the chamber, that I would be standing in the heart of an alien university, discussing cosmic harmonics and my place in the vastness of the universe, I would have laughed. He allowed a small smile to form, the corners of his lips curving upward despite the weight of the moment. But now, I feel a pull toward something greater. I know I'm part of something bigger than myself. His gaze shifted, taking in the faces of the council members before finally resting on Vera. There was a quiet strength in her expression, a steadiness that gave him a sense of comfort and resolve. She had been by his side since the beginning of this journey, a guide through uncharted territory, and her presence made him feel less alone. But I can't just stay here, Holden continued. Locked away in an ivory tower, surrounded by the echoes of ancient knowledge. If I have a connection to this universe, I want to explore it. I want to experience it. He paused, letting his words sink in before meeting Vera's eyes again. And if that means protecting the site, I want to understand how it fits into the rest of the galaxy. How it harmonizes with everything beyond. A murmur rippled through the council as some members nodded in agreement while others regarded him with quiet approval. The silver-faced council member inclined their head, their voice steady and composed. Then we will equip you as a true Veloy. A voyager among the stars, a guardian of harmony. With those words, Holden felt a surge of both excitement and apprehension. A vessel. A ship of his own to traverse the galaxy. The thought thrilled him, filling him with wonder, yet also caused a flutter of doubt. He had dreamed of adventure, of journeys to the unknown, but never had he imagined it would carry him this far beyond everything he had known. Vera stepped forward, her gaze intent as she met his eyes. If you are to carry this legacy, Holden, you will need a companion, a guide. And if you would allow it, I would accompany you. Her voice softened slightly, her usual composed tone faltering for just a moment as something more vulnerable shone through. A deep understanding that the journey they were about to embark on was not one to be faced alone. You have shown me that the site is not something to hold behind walls, but something to experience, to share. Holden's heart skipped a beat. The thought of traveling the stars with Vera at his side was both thrilling and grounding. She had been his anchor through the trials, a constant presence in an ever-changing reality. The idea of facing the vast, unpredictable universe without her seemed unimaginable. I'd like that, Holden replied softly, his voice steadier than he felt. But are you sure? You'd be leaving Aronium, everything you've known? Vera gave him a small, knowing smile, her golden-tipped tendril shifting gently as she searched his face. The universe has a way of calling us to unexpected paths. And I believe my place is with you, wherever that path may lead. With that, the decision was made. The council members murmured among themselves before stepping forward one by one to offer their blessings. Each one offered a brief touch on his forehead, a traditional VY gesture that left him with a faint warmth, a sense of grounding that steadied him as the reality of his choice settled over him. The next day, Holden and Vera stood in the docking bay of Aronium, where a sleek silver ship awaited them. Its surface shimmered softly with the same ethereal star-like glow he had seen in the chamber, its design unlike anything he had ever encountered on Earth. The council had provided a small crew to assist them in preparing for launch, ensuring that everything was ready for their journey into the stars. Holden walked around the vessel, running his hand along the smooth, cool metal. This was it, the start of a journey that would take him far beyond the limits of everything he had imagined. Vera approached him carrying a small metallic cube. She pressed it into his hand, and the surface shimmered before transforming into a holographic map filled with distant star systems and faint lines marking potential routes. "This is our map," she said, her voice carrying a note of excitement she rarely revealed. "It's synchronized to the network of Veloy outposts throughout the galaxy. We'll be able to navigate and stay connected with other Velothi protectors should we need them." Holden gazed at the map, the countless star systems stretching out before him like an open road. "It's beautiful," he murmured, struck by the sheer vastness of it all. Vera's expression softened, a warmth in her gaze that was usually hidden behind her diplomatic poise. "And it's only the beginning. Every journey has a rhythm, a harmony that guides it. We'll find ours along the way." Holden nodded, feeling a surge of gratitude for her presence. The vastness of the galaxy was intimidating, but with Vera beside him, he felt a sense of purpose that tempered his fears. As they boarded the ship, the familiar weight of gravity shifted, adapting to his form. He settled into the pilot's seat, and Vera took her place beside him, her fingers gliding over the controls with practiced ease. "Are you ready?" she asked, her gaze steady, filled with a quiet strength. Holden took a deep breath, his hands gripping the controls. "I don't know if I'll ever be ready," he admitted with a faint smile playing on his lips, "but I'm willing." The engines hummed to life, and as the ship lifted off, Holden glanced out at the sweeping expanse of Aronium below. The campus glittered under the faint glow of starlight, the bioluminescent pathways winding through the city like veins of light. A pang of nostalgia washed over him, a deep connection to the place that had opened his eyes to a reality he hadn't known existed. But he knew this was where he belonged, at the helm of a starship with the universe stretching out before him. With a final nod from Vera, Holden guided the ship into the vastness of space. The stars formed a brilliant tapestry around them, illuminating the dark void with their shimmering brilliance. The galaxy awaited them, its countless mysteries and harmonies just beyond their reach. As they soared through the stars, Holden looked over at Vera. Her expression was calm, yet there was a spark in her eyes, a flicker of excitement that mirrored his own. So he broke the silence. "Where to first?" Vera leaned back in her seat, the corners of her mouth lifting in a rare, playful smile. "Wherever the stars take us, somewhere neither of us have been before." With that, they set off into the unknown. Their ship glimmered silver against the darkness, a single spark in the boundless galaxy. They were voyagers, protectors, and above all, companions bound by a shared purpose and a bond forged in the harmonies of the universe. The journey ahead would be long and filled with challenges, but Holden knew one thing for certain. Together they were ready to face whatever awaited them, one star at a time.